The village's secret. The village of TMU was known for its ancient traditions, deep forests, and whispered legends. It was a place where stories carried weight, where the past shaped the present, and where fear of the unknown ruled the hearts of many. And at the center of the village's whispers was a woman. Naya. She was unlike any other in TMU. Her smooth ebony skin glowed under the sun, her long, intricate braids cascaded down her back, woven with small silver beads that shimmered when she moved. Her beauty was undeniable, yet it was not her features that made the villagers murmur when she passed. It was her eyes. Under the moonlight, they held a faint, ghostly silver glow, a light that flickered like dying embers in the dark. To the villagers, this was not natural. "This girl is not one of us," the elders whispered. "She was born from the shadow spirits," the women told their children, pulling them away when Naya walked through the market. "No human should have eyes that glow," the hunters muttered amongst themselves. And though Naya had done nothing to harm anyone, the village remained wary. Fear had no need for proof. A woman cursed by rumors. Naya never understood why people feared her. She had been raised in the village like any other girl, taught to cook, weave, and respect the land. But no matter how kind she was, no one trusted her. They never invited her to their gatherings. They never called on her to help in the fields. She was alone. Still, one man did not fear her. His name was Kofi. The strongest hunter in TMU, a man respected by all. His voice was deep as thunder, his arms as thick as tree trunks, and when he walked through the village, people stepped aside in admiration. Unlike the others, he did not believe the stories about Naya. "She is just a woman," he would say. "Not a spirit, not a curse. A woman." And when he asked for her hand in marriage, Naya thought perhaps the whispers would finally end. Perhaps, if she was the wife of TMU's mightiest hunter, the people would see her as one of them. Perhaps she would belong. The wedding night. The wedding was grand, filled with drumming, dancing, and the scent of roasted meats filling the air. Villagers sang, the elders gave their blessings, and for the first time, Naya felt joy. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe the village did accept her after all. As night fell, the guests departed one by one, leaving the newlyweds alone in their hut. Naya, still dressed in her wedding garments, turned to Kofi with a soft smile. But the warmth did not return to her. Kofi sat at the edge of their woven mat, his broad shoulders tense, his face dark with something unreadable. Then, he spoke. "You are mine now." Naya blinked, startled. Kofi had never spoken to her like this before. I know," she said hesitantly. Kofi turned to face her, and in the dim candlelight, his expression had changed. The strong, confident man she had married that morning was gone. In his place was someone hard, cruel, and impatient. He reached for her, his grip tight around her wrist. "You will do as I say." Naya's heart pounded. She tried to pull away, but his grasp was like iron. "Kofi, you're hurting me." His eyes darkened. "You belong to me, Naya." The first tear. Pain and fear swelled inside Naya, twisting into something unbearable. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she fought them back. She had never cried in front of anyone before. She did not want to seem weak. But as Kofi's grip tightened, she could not hold it in any longer. A single tear fell from her eye and landed on the woven mat beneath them. Except, it did not sink into the fibers. It did not vanish like water. It moved. Naya gasped as the tear twisted and stretched, shifting into something alive. A small black shadow slithered out from where the tear had fallen. A creature. Its thin, inky body coiled, its tiny silver eyes glinting in the candlelight. It hissed softly, a sound like whispers from the dark. Kofi stumbled back, his breath hitching. What is that? Naya stared in horror, wiping her face. Another tear fell. And another. And with each tear, another shadowy creature emerged, larger than the last. The hut filled with them. Their glowing eyes flickered, their tongues tasting the air. Kofi tried to move, but the creatures moved faster. They slithered around his legs, wrapping tightly, their bodies like smoke yet solid as stone. He screamed, trying to shake them off. Naya sobbed, unable to stop the flood of shadows, unable to stop the creatures that came with them. The more she cried, the more they multiplied. Kofi's screams turned to strangled gurgles as the shadows coiled around his body, sinking their invisible fangs into his skin. His muscles twitched, his breath grew ragged. And then... silence. The aftermath. Naya opened her eyes. The hut was quiet. The shadows had vanished. The only thing left behind was Kofi's lifeless body. His face was frozen in horror, his skin cold and still. Naya clamped a hand over her mouth, choking back a sob. She had not meant for this to happen. She had only cried. She had only cried. And he had died. The truth settled into her bones, heavy and unshakable. The villagers had been right. She was not normal. She was not like them. She was cursed. And by sunrise, the village would know. They would come for her. They would never let her stay. Tears welled in her eyes again. But she forced them down. She could not risk calling forth more shadows. So with a final, trembling breath, Naya stood, turned toward the door, and stepped into the dark, knowing her life in TMU was over. The banishment. The sun had barely begun to rise when the first villagers arrived at Naya's hut. It was the smell that drew them. A cold, sharp scent of something unnatural, something wrong. One of the village women, on her way to fetch water, stopped mid-step when she saw Kofi's door wide open, swaying slightly in the early morning breeze. "Kofi," she called hesitantly, stepping closer. No answer. Another villager joined her, and then another, until a small crowd gathered at the entrance of the hut. The air was thick with unease. The whispers started before anyone stepped inside. Then, one of the hunters, a man named Mosi, took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, the hut was silent, but the moment Mosi's eyes landed on the lifeless form of Kofi, a terrified cry tore from his throat. "Kofi is dead." The village erupted in chaos. Women gasped. Children were pulled away. Men gripped their weapons, their eyes darting around as though expecting the thing that had killed Kofi to leap at them next. And then someone noticed Naya's absence. "She is not here," one of the elders murmured. Another voice, sharp with fear, called out. "She killed him." "No, worse," an old woman rasped, clutching a woven shawl over her chest. "She is cursed." The word spread like fire in dry grass. "She whips spirits of the dead. She has brought doom upon us all." Mosi took a shaky step back, his fingers tightening around the handle of his spear. The elders must decide her fate. The gathering under the baobab. By midday, the entire village had gathered beneath the great baobab tree, the ancient heart of TMU where all judgments were passed. The elders sat in a solemn circle, their lined faces grim. Chief Jabari, an old yet powerful man, leaned on his staff and looked out over the anxious faces before him. "This is no small matter," he said, his voice heavy. "Kofi was our greatest hunter. Now he is dead. And the woman who was last with him is gone." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "She is not a woman," someone spat. "She is a child of the shadows." Another elder, a frail woman named Mama Afia, spoke next. "I have seen many things in my years, but never have I heard of a woman who cries black spirits." Mosi stepped forward, his expression hard. I saw his body myself. His face was twisted in terror, as though he saw something before he died. The chief's grip on his staff tightened. There can be only one punishment for this. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath. She must be banished. Gasps of shock, murmurs of approval. She must never return. The decision was made. The banishment of Naya. Naya had been hiding in the shadows at the edge of the village, watching, listening. She had known this would happen. They will never believe me. Her hands trembled as she gripped the thin cloth wrapped around her shoulders. A part of her wanted to run. But where would she go? Then, she heard it. The village drums pounded loudly, signaling the official judgment. It was time. She stepped forward, her heart pounding as she made her way toward the baobab tree. A hush fell over the crowd as she approached. Every face turned to her. Some filled with fear. Some filled with anger. None with mercy. She stopped before the elders and lowered her gaze. Naya, the chief said, his voice void of warmth. You have brought death into our village. Whether by intention or by the curse that follows you, it does not matter. TMU cannot house what it fears. Naya's throat felt dry, but she forced herself to speak. I did not choose this, she whispered. You did not choose it, the chief agreed, but we cannot risk it. The decision was final. A village woman, one of the elder wives, stepped forward hesitantly and placed a small bundle of food and a water pouch at Naya's feet. It was the only mercy they would offer her. Naya stared at the bundle. Then, slowly, she reached down, picked it up, and turned away. The village did not say goodbye. The people did not follow. And as Naya took her first steps beyond the village boundary, she knew. She would never return. The forbidden Nyoka forest. Naya walked. And walked. And walked. The tall grass scratched against her legs as she moved toward the Nyoka forest, the land beyond TMU that no one dared enter. It was said that lost souls roamed there, whispering in the wind, waiting for the foolish to wander too deep. A cold wind cawed around her as she stood before the entrance. The trees were taller than any she had ever seen, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. A voice, soft as a sigh, seemed to drift from the darkness. Come. Naya swallowed. She glanced back once, just once, toward the village. Then she stepped into the shadows. The forest of the cursed. The Nyoka forest was nothing like the world Naya had known. As she walked deeper into its heart, the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and unseen flowers. The wind carried soft, ghostly whispers that seemed to call her name. Naya. Naya. She stopped, turning sharply, but saw nothing. Still, she could feel eyes watching her. The trees stood unnaturally tall, their twisted branches tangled like skeletal fingers, reaching for the sky. The bark was dark, almost black, and the deeper she went, the less sunlight reached the ground. Insects unlike any she had ever seen hovered in the air, their tiny bodies glowing with eerie blue and green light. Some paused softly, flickering like the dying embers of a fire. Naya wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. She had walked for hours, her legs aching, her feet raw from the rough forest floor. She was alone. And she was hungry. The river's edge. By the time Naya reached a small river, exhaustion had begun to drag her down like a heavy stone. The water glowed faintly, casting a silver light across the darkened trees. The air near it was cool, refreshing, as though the river itself held something ancient and powerful. Naya collapsed at the edge, her breath ragged. She cupped her hands and drank greedily, the cold liquid rushing down her parched throat. For the first time since entering the forest, she let herself close her eyes. Just for a moment. Just long enough to rest. The arrival of Mama Sefiu. The sound of twigs snapping jolted Naya awake. She gasped, scrambling back as a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman. She was old, her back slightly bent, her face lined with the marks of time. Her hair was long and silver, tangled like the wild vines that hung from the trees. But it was her eyes that struck Naya the most. They were silver. Like hers. The old woman studied Naya carefully, then smiled, her lips cracked but kind. "I have been waiting for you," she said. Naya swallowed, her heart pounding. "Who are you?" The woman stepped closer, her bare feet barely making a sound on the damp earth. "I am called Mama Sefiu," she said. "I have lived in this forest longer than I can remember. I am a healer. A watcher of things others have forgotten." She crouched beside Naya, tilting her head slightly. "And I know what you are." Naya froze. Her hands clenched into fists. "You know," she whispered. Mama Sefiu nodded. "I know what your tears bring." The truth of Naya's curse. Naya's breath came fast and uneven. She had lived her entire life in confusion, pushed away, feared, whispered about. Now, someone claimed to know the truth. She needed answers. "Why is this happening to me?" she asked, her voice raw with desperation. "What am I?" Mama Sefiu sighed, lowering herself to sit on a moss-covered rock. "You are the result of a bargain," she said. Naya stiffened. "A bargain?" Mama Sefiu's silver eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Long ago, your mother stood before the spirits and made a request," she explained. "She wished for a child. A child as beautiful as the night sky. A child who would be admired by all." Naya's stomach twisted. Her mother had never told her this. "But beauty," the old woman continued, "comes at a price." Naya felt her heart slowly sinking. What did the spirits take in return? Mama Sefiu's gaze darkened. "Your sorrow." Naya's breath hitched. She didn't understand. "But I feel sorrow," she said. "I feel sadness. I feel fear." Mama Sefiu nodded. "Yes, you feel these things. But your body cannot hold them." She leaned forward, voice low. "Instead of weeping like others, your tears become something else. Your sorrow gives birth to shadows. To spirits. To those who have suffered injustice." Naya felt a deep chill crawl down her spine. She had thought her curse was random, cruel. But it wasn't. She was never meant to cry like other people. Her tears carried the weight of lost souls. A sudden memory flashed in her mind. Kofi's face, frozen in terror. The dark shapes calling around him. He shuddered. The path to freedom. Naya gripped the ground, trying to steady herself. "Is there a way to stop it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Sefiu watched her for a long moment before finally speaking. "There is one who can undo this." Naya's head snapped up. "Who?" Mama Sefiu turned her gaze toward the river. "The great spirit of the waters, Mzingi," she said. "Only she has the power to return your sorrow to you." Naya's heart pounded. Mzingi. She had heard of her in childhood stories, the ancient river spirit, older than the world itself. People spoke of her power, her mercy, and her wrath. Naya licked her dry lips. "Where do I find her?" Mama Sefiu lifted a gnarled finger and pointed east, deeper into the forest. "Follow the river until you reach the place where the water glows at night," she said. "There, you will find her." Naya hesitated. "What if she refuses to help me?" Mama Sefiu's expression darkened. "Then you will remain as you are." Naya felt her chest tighten. She could not live like this. She could not continue bringing death and fear wherever she went. She had to try. Taking a deep breath, she stood. Mama Sefiu watched her carefully. "Be warned, child," the old woman said. "Spirits do not give without taking." Naya swallowed but nodded. She had already lost everything. What more could they take? With one last glance at Mama Sefiu, she turned toward the river and began her journey toward Nzingi, the river of the spirits. The journey begins. Naya walked for days, following the winding river, its waters glowing faintly beneath the silver moon. The deeper she traveled into the wildlands, the more she felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her. Each night, the whispers in the wind grew louder. "Turn back. Go no further." But Naya pressed on. She had lost her home. She had lost her place in the world. And now, she had only one thing left to lose, her curse. The first trial, the storm. On the third night, the air grew heavy, thick with something unnatural. The once gentle wind turned into a howling force, rattling the trees as the sky darkened. Then, with a roar like 1,000 voices screaming at once, the storm struck. Lightning split the sky in violent flashes. Rain poured down in sheets, drenching Naya's skin as she stumbled along the riverbank. The water, once glowing peacefully, began to churn and swell, rising higher, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. A giant wave surged toward her, twisting unnaturally, as if it had a will of its own. Naya gasped, throwing herself against the ground as the water crashed over her. She was swept away. The river pulled her under, dragging her into its cold embrace. Her arms flailed, her lungs burned. Then, suddenly, a hand shot out of the darkness, grasping her wrist with impossible strength. With a powerful yank, Naya was thrown onto the shore, coughing and gasping for air. She looked up, but no one was there. Only the whisper of the wind. "Keep going." Naya shivered but rose to her feet. She would not turn back. The second trial, the wolves. As dawn broke, Naya continued on, her body sore and weak. The forest around her grew darker, the trees more twisted, their bark covered in strange markings. Then, a low, rumbling growl echoed from the shadows. Naya froze. From between the trees, a pack of massive black wolves emerged, their eyes glowing like hot embers in the darkness. Their fur was thick and matted, their muscles rippling beneath their skin as they circled her. One wolf, larger than the rest, stepped forward. Its lips curled back, revealing razor-sharp fangs dripping with saliva. Naya stood her ground, her heart hammering. She knew that if she ran, she would die. Slowly, she lowered herself to her knees, her breath steady. The alpha wolf sniffed the air, its fiery gaze never leaving hers. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, without warning, the wolves vanished into the mist, as if they had never been there at all. Naya exhaled shakily, but she did not waste time. She kept walking. The third trial, the masked figure. The river widened, glowing brighter as Naya neared her destination. She could feel the power in the air, thick and ancient. Then, a figure stepped onto the path ahead. They wore a dark robe, their face hidden behind an intricately carved wooden mask. Naya stopped, her breath caught in her throat. The figure tilted its head, as if studying her. Then, it spoke. "You do not belong here." The voice was neither man nor woman, neither young nor old. It was as if the wind itself had spoken. "I seek Mzingi," Naya said firmly. The figure shook its head. "Turn back. The price you will pay is greater than you understand." Naya's fingers curled into fists. "I have nothing left to lose." The masked figure was silent for a long moment. Then, it stepped aside, vanishing into the mist. The path was clear. Naya took a deep breath and walked toward the sacred river. The river awakens. The ground beneath her vibrated. The river shimmered, its glow pulsing brighter and brighter until it was like a second sun, casting long, ghostly shadows across the trees. Then, the water began to rise. It twisted, spiraling upward like a living thing, shifting, reshaping, until it became the form of a woman. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, her skin as smooth and dark as the night sky. Her eyes burned like twin stars, endless and unknowable. She was beautiful and terrible all at once. Naya fell to her knees. The woman's voice thundered across the sky. "You dare call upon me?" Naya's voice trembled, but she spoke. "I do not want this curse," she said. "I do not want to bring death with my sorrow." The river spirit tilted her head, studying her. "A gift can be a curse," she said. "And a curse can be a gift." Her voice was ancient, filled with both wisdom and cruelty. The balance must be kept. Naya swallowed hard. "I do not understand." Mzingi raised a hand, and the river swirled around her, images forming in the water. Naya saw her own reflection, flickering like a ghost. She saw Kofi's lifeless body. She saw the faces of the villagers, twisted in fear. And then, she saw herself, standing in the village, surrounded by people. But she felt nothing. No sorrow. No joy. No love. Mzingi's voice echoed through the air. "To break the curse, you must surrender your emotions." Naya's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Mzingi's silver eyes locked onto hers. "You will feel no pain," she said. "But you will also feel no love." Naya shook her head. "No happiness. No sadness." Her breath hitched. "No fear. No anger. No warmth. Only emptiness." Naya staggered backward, her mind reeling. Was this truly freedom? Or was it another kind of curse? She had to choose. And she had to choose now. The water churned, waiting for her answer. Naya took a deep, trembling breath. And stepped forward. The price of freedom. A choice made. The river churned violently, its glowing waters reflecting the turmoil in Naya's heart. She stood before Mzingi, the river spirit, staring into her silver, ancient eyes. Mzingi had given her a choice. To break her curse, she must give up her emotions completely. No sadness. No happiness. No love. Nothing. Naya's fingers trembled. She thought of Kofi's lifeless body. She thought of the villagers turning their backs on her. She thought of a lifetime of loneliness. She had nothing left. Nothing except this curse. And she was willing to give up anything to be free. Slowly, she lifted her chin and whispered, "I accept." Mzingi's lips curved into a knowing, unreadable smile. "So be it." She raised her hands. And the river obeyed. The taking of emotion. A soft blue light surrounded Naya, cool and weightless, like mist in the early dawn. It curled around her body, wrapping her in a cocoon of water and light. Then, a sudden force struck her chest. Naya gasped, stumbling back as something inside her shifted. It was as if invisible hands had reached inside her, grasping at something deep, something sacred. Her emotions. A sharp, twisting pain spread through her ribcage, like threads being pulled from her very soul. Naya opened her mouth to scream. But no sound came. A wave of cold emptiness washed over her. The ache in her chest vanished. The tightness in her throat disappeared. Her tears stopped. And for the first time in her life, Naya felt nothing. Hollow freedom. The blue light faded, and the river calmed. Mzingi lowered her hands, studying Naya with quiet curiosity. "How do you feel?" she asked. Naya blinked. She felt nothing. She was not relieved. She was not sad. She was simply here. She lifted her hands, looking at her palms as if expecting them to tremble, but they were steady. Her heart, which had always raced in fear, in sorrow, in hope, now beat with silent indifference. The world felt distant, as if she was watching herself from somewhere far away. Mzingi nodded, satisfied. It is done. She turned, her liquid form dissolving back into the river, leaving behind only silence. The walk back. Naya did not know how long she stood there. Seconds. Minutes. Hours. It did not matter. Eventually, she turned away from the river and walked. She moved through the dark forest, the same one that had once filled her with terror. Now, the shadows did not frighten her. The voices in the wind whispered as they always had, but their words no longer carried meaning. The glowing insects hovered nearby, pulsing softly, yet she felt no wonder. A pack of wolves appeared on the path ahead, growling, their eyes burning like embers. Naya simply walked past them. They did not attack. They did not challenge her. For what is there to fear in something that feels nothing? Emptiness. Days passed. Or maybe weeks. Naya no longer counted time. She had returned to Mama Sefiu's hut, deep within the forest. The old woman had been waiting for her. She looked into Naya's silver eyes, searching, but there was no reaction. You have done it, Mama Sefiu murmured. Naya nodded, her face blank. You no longer cry shadows. Another nod. Mama Sefiu sighed, sadness flickering across her face. You have gained your freedom. Naya met her gaze and spoke the truth. I have lost nothing. The old woman's lips parted, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she simply shook her head and turned away. A life without pain. Naya wandered through the forest, no longer haunted by nightmares. She never shivered in fear. She never ached with sorrow. She never wished for something more. But she also never laughed. Never smiled. Never felt warmth in the sunlight or wonder in the stars. One evening, she stood at the edge of a clear lake, watching the moon reflect on its surface. Her own face stared back at her. For the first time, she truly looked at herself. And she saw nothing. No sorrow. No joy. Nothing but a hollow girl who once had been human. The world moves on. Years passed. Naya returned to TMU, the village that had once feared her. The people were hesitant at first, watching her from afar, expecting something unnatural to happen. But she did not cry. And so, they accepted her again. She lived among them, silent and distant, moving through life like a shadow of who she used to be. She married. She had children. She worked in the fields. Yet nothing ever touched her heart. When her firstborn took their first steps, she did not feel pride. When her husband whispered loving words, she did not feel warmth. When she sat alone beneath the baobab tree, she did not feel loneliness. She was free of her curse. But was this truly freedom? A question unanswered. One night, an old friend visited her, a childhood companion who had once played by her side before the village had turned against her. The woman sat across from Naya, watching her carefully. You are here, she said softly. Naya nodded. But it feels like you are not truly with us. Naya did not respond. Her friend's eyes filled with quiet grief. Do you not feel love? Do you not feel sadness? Naya hesitated. Then, for the first time, she spoke the truth. I do not feel anything. Her friend lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. She whispered something Naya would never forget. Then is this truly freedom? And for the first time since she had walked away from the river, Naya felt something stir deep within her. Something small. Something forgotten. Something she could not name. But it was there. And it terrified her. The hollow life. Returned to the village. The sun sat high in the sky when Naya reached the edge of TMU, the village she had once called home. She had been gone for years, yet everything looked the same. The same thatched roof huts. The same children running barefoot through the dust. The same elders sitting beneath the baobab tree, their faces carved with lines of wisdom and time. But something was different. The whispers that once followed her were now absent. The villagers saw her approaching, their eyes widening in fear. At first, they hesitated. For so long, Naya had been the cursed girl, the woman who cried shadows, the one who brought death with her tears. But she did not cry now. The air around her was calm. And so, little by little, they let her return. A life rebuilt. Naya settled back into the village. She worked in the fields, harvesting cassava and millet alongside the other women. She fetched water from the river. She joined the market, selling woven baskets, her hands moving with careful precision. She married. A man named Tond, a gentle weaver who had always watched her from afar, offered his hand in marriage. And she accepted. She had children. She built a home. She was free of a curse. She had everything a person should need. Yet, she felt nothing. The absence of emotion. When her firstborn child took their first steps, the other mothers cheered, clapping their hands in joy. Naya clapped too. But her hands felt empty. When her husband held her close at night, whispering, "I love you," she smiled. But her chest remained cold. She did not laugh. She did not cry. She did not feel warmth beneath her skin. She lived without sorrow. But she also lived without love. A friend's concern. One evening, as the sky burned orange with the setting sun, an old friend came to visit her. Zola, a woman who had once been like a sister to her, sat across from her near the fire. For a long time, she said nothing, only watching. Finally, Zola spoke. "You have returned," she said. Naya nodded. "I have. But it is as if you are not truly here." Naya tilted her head, puzzled. "I work in the fields," she said. "I cook. I raise my children. I am here." Zola shook her head. "You move like a person, but you do not live like one." Naya said nothing. She had no words for what she was feeling. Or rather, for what she was not feeling. Zola's voice softened. "Do you not feel love?" she asked. Naya hesitated. "No." Zola swallowed. "Do you not feel sadness?" Naya shook her head. "No." A deep sorrow crossed Zola's face, something Naya could not understand. Zola whispered, "Then is this truly freedom?" The words lingered in the air, wrapping around Naya like an unseen weight. She did not answer. But for the first time in years, something inside her stirred. Something she could not name. And it terrified her. The question that would not leave. That night, Naya lay awake. Her husband's breathing was steady beside her, her children slept peacefully in the next room. The village was quiet. Yet inside her, something would not rest. Zola's words echoed in her mind. Is this truly freedom? She thought of Mzingi, the river spirit who had taken her sorrow. She had believed that without sorrow, she would be free. But was she truly free? Or had she simply been left empty? She had given up pain. But she had also given up love. She had nothing to fear. But she had nothing to hope for, either. She had broken her curse. But in doing so, had she broken something greater within herself? A deep, unsettling thought crept into her mind. Had she made a mistake? And for the first time in years, Naya felt something. A shadow of a feeling. A whisper of something she had lost. Something that made her chest feel tight, her breath feel shallow. She did not know what to call it. But it was there. And it would not leave. The decision. By morning, Naya had made a choice. She could not live like this anymore. She did not know if she could ever be who she once was. But she had to try. She had to know. Was there a way back? Was there a way to feel again? With silent determination, she packed a small bag, wrapped herself in a cloth, and left before the sun had fully risen. She did not tell her husband. She did not tell her children. There was only one place she needed to go. The river. Back to Mzingi. To find the truth. Or to be lost forever, the final choice. Return to the sacred river. Naya's footsteps were silent as she walked through the dense forest. The night air was thick, heavy with the scent of wet earth and blooming flowers. The wind whispered through the trees, but this time, it did not carry warnings. It carried expectation. She was going back. Back to the river where she had lost everything. Back to the spirit who had taken her sorrow and her joy. Back to Mzingi. When Naya finally reached the riverbank, the glowing blue water reflected the full moon above, shimmering like a mirror. She knelt by the water's edge, her fingers pressing into the cool earth. For a long moment, she just stared at her reflection. A face she recognized, but did not know. A face without pain, without happiness. Without life. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mzingi. The water stilled. Then, slowly, it rippled outward. From the center of the river, the water rose, twisting and shifting, until a shape formed. A woman, tall and fluid, her hair like flowing water, her skin smooth and dark as the night sky, her silver eyes gleaming with power. The river spirit had returned. Her voice echoed across the water. You dare call upon me again? Naya swallowed, her heart pounding. She did not hesitate. I want to feel again. The spirit warning. Mzingi tilted her head, studying Naya with something between curiosity and amusement. You gave up your sorrow, she said. You chose to be free. Why return? Naya's breath was steady. Because I was wrong. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of those words. She had spent so long believing that freedom meant emptiness. That to be free from pain, she had to be free from everything else, too. She had been willing to trade her sorrow for peace. But she had lost more than sorrow. She had lost love. She had lost laughter. She had lost herself. Mzingi sighed, the water around her swirling softly. If you take back your sorrow, she warned, the shadows may return. Naya closed her eyes. She thought of Tond, her husband. She thought of her children, waiting for her at home. She thought of Zola's words. Is this truly freedom? Then, she opened her eyes. I would rather cry and feel pain than live without love. Mzingi smiled. Not in triumph. Not in mockery. But in understanding. She raised her hands. The river rose, twisting into a delicate blue mist. It moved slowly, wrapping itself around Naya, spiraling toward her chest. Naya gasped. The mist pressed against her skin. Then sank into her heart. And for the first time in years, she felt warmth. A tear that holds no curse. The moment was brief. A single second, but it stretched infinitely. Naya's chest ached, as if she had been empty for so long, and was now being filled again. Memories crashed into her. Her mother's laughter. The first time she danced in the rain. The way Kofi had looked at her on their wedding night, before everything changed. The moment her child took their first step. Every emotion, every joy, every sorrow, every love she had ever known, came rushing back. Naya's eyes burned. And then, a single tear rolled down her cheek. For a heartbeat, she feared the worst. She braced for the whispers, the dark creatures calling from the ground, the cold embrace of the shadows. But nothing happened. The tear dropped into the river. And the water remained still. Mzingi's voice was soft. It is done. Then, like the water she had risen from, the spirit melted away, dissolving into the river, leaving behind only the sound of the wind in the trees. Naya lifted her hand to her chest, pressing her palm against her heartbeat. It was steady. It was real. And for the first time in so long, she smiled. A life reclaimed. Naya walked back to the village. Her feet bare against the dirt, her heart beating with something new, something she had not felt in years. Hope. She did not know if the villagers would accept her again. She did not know if they would see her as whole, or still as a woman cursed by the past. But she had to try. She had to live. As she entered the village, the people gathered around her, their faces full of uncertainty. They watched, waiting, watching her every move. A single voice broke the silence. Does she still cry spirits? The village healer, an elder with wise, knowing eyes, stepped forward. If the curse has lifted, he said, we must see proof. Naya nodded. She held out her hand. The healer took a small knife from his belt, hesitating for only a moment before he cut a shallow line across her palm. Naya watched as a single tear welled in her eye. She let it fall. It rolled down her cheek and dripped onto the earth. The villagers held their breath. And then, nothing. No shadows. No whispers. No ghost rising from the dust. Just a tear. Just a woman. Just Naya. The village erupted in cheers. Women rushed to embrace her, men clapped their hands in relief, and children ran to touch her, laughing without fear. The healer raised his hands. The curse is broken. The chief, standing beneath the great baobab tree, nodded solemnly. Then let it be known, Naya is free. A story that lives forever. Years passed. Naya lived not as a woman cursed, but as a woman whole. She laughed. She wept. She loved fiercely, and she mourned deeply. And the people of TMU did not tell her story with fear anymore. They told it with admiration. They told of Naya, the woman who wept shadows. Not as a warning, but as a legend. A woman who lost everything but found herself again. And when she grew old, when she sat once more beside the river, she no longer feared the reflection that looked back at her. For she knew who she was. She was Naya. She was alive. And she was free. The end.